I paid $50,000 for a luxury family vacation. At dinner, my uncle raised a glass and said, "You've always been a failure until we carried you." My father smirked. My mother kept cutting her steak. They laughed until I made a toast. By the end of the night, dinner didn't taste so good anymore. "You've always been a failure until we carried you." Uncle David's voice rang out over the clinking glasses, loud, confident, like he'd just said something clever. A few people laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's what they always did. My father irked into his wine. My mother just kept cutting her steak like she didn't hear a thing. I sat there, swirling my drink, staring at the people around this long, expensive dining table. Every single one of them was enjoying the vacation I paid for. $50,000. Flights, private chef, oceanfront villa, everything. And yet somehow I was still the loser. Because I didn't follow their plan. I wasn't the golden child like my brother Matt, who took over the family business. I wasn't a perfect daughter like Olivia, who married a rich lawyer and threw charity galas for show. I was the black sheep. The one who dropped out of law school, the one who chose to work with septic tanks instead of sitting in an office. The one who started a dirty business instead of a respectable one. Duke of Drains, Matt once called me at a Christmas dinner, thinking he was the funniest guy in the world. Captain of the cesspools, Uncle David had added. At least someone in the family knows how to clean up a mess. I had shot back, earning a few gasps. But that's the thing. They laughed, they mocked. They made jokes about how embarrassing it must be that I made my living pumping out septic tanks and hauling waste. Yet they never asked how much I actually made. They never bothered to check the numbers. Never noticed when I started signing city contracts. Never realized when I expanded to industrial clients. Never realized that dirty money paid for this whole vacation. I exhaled slowly, feeling the usual anger creep in. The kind I always swallowed down. The kind I let slide off my shoulder, because family is family, right? Nah, not this time. I stood up, raising my glass. A toast. Everyone turned. A few eyebrows lifted. I never made toasts to family, I started, keeping my voice light. To the people who always remind me where I came from. A few chuckles. Matt leaned back in his chair, smirking. He thought I was playing along. I smiled. And to me, I said, like, for paying for this entire trip. Silence. Uncle David's grin faded. My mother finally looked up. My father's fingers tightened around his glass. $50,000, I continued, swirling my drink. For the villa, the food, the endless bottles of wine you've all been enjoying. I took a sip, letting the words sink in. So cheers, I said, lifting my glass higher. To the failure who somehow managed to pay for everything with clean money from a dirty job. Dead silence. Matt looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Olivia let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on," she said. "David was just joking." "Yeah," Uncle David muttered. "Just a joke." I looked at him and smiled. "Funny, I don't hear anyone laughing." I downed the rest of my drink and sat back down. Dinner suddenly didn't taste so good for them anymore. I leaned back in my chair, waiting for someone to speak. But they didn't. My father cleared his throat like he was about to say something wise, but instead he just swirled his wine. Uncle David stared at the table as if he had just noticed the pattern on the tablecloth. My mother acted like none of this concerned her, but I saw it. I saw the way the truth was gnawing at them. "What's wrong?" I raised an eyebrow. Is the truth hard to swallow? Or is it just difficult to admit that this failure paid for all of this? "It's not about the money," my brother Matt finally spoke, setting down his fork. "It's about status." I laughed. "Oh, really? And tell me, does status pay the bills?" Matt frowned, but quickly regained his usual confidence. "Don't be so simple-minded," he said, straightening his posture. "We're building something bigger than just making money. The family business is about prestige, tradition, influence. You wouldn't understand that because you chose, well, you know." I drummed my fingers on the table. "Yeah. Let's talk about that, about your prestigious business, the one that, if I'm not mistaken, is barely staying afloat." The flicker of tension across Matt's face was satisfying. "Tell me, who paid for last year's corporate losses?" I tilted my head. "Oh, right. Dad had to take out another loan. And what about Olivia's little boutique? Still in the red, isn't it?" I let the words hang. Yet somehow I'm the one being laughed at when I'm the only one at this table who can afford to take the whole family on a vacation without begging for an extension from the bank. Matt's jaw tightened. "That's not the point," he snapped. "There's more to life than just making money. It's about respect, influence, being part of something bigger." I smirked. "Right. So let me get this straight. If you struggle and barely make ends meet, it's building a legacy. But if I actually succeed in my field, I'm still a joke because my work isn't glamorous enough for you." Money isn't everything, Matt said through clenched teeth. I picked up my glass and took a slow sip. Tell that to the waiter when the bill comes. Silence. Because no matter how much they talked about status, when it came down to it, I was the only one keeping this family's luxurious lifestyle running. And they knew it. Silence lingered over the table like a heavy fog, thick with everything they wanted to say but couldn't or wouldn't. Matt clenched his jaw. Olivia avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by her wine glass. My father exhaled slowly through his nose, the way he did when he was trying not to lose his temper. And Uncle David, he just sat there, drumming his fingers against the table, still processing the fact that I had just thrown their entire idea of success back in their faces. Money isn't everything, Matt repeated, his voice tighter this time. I chuckled, shaking my head. Right! And yet, for some reason, none of you could afford this trip. Funny how that works, huh? Olivia finally spoke, her tone overly sweet, the way she always got when she was trying to keep the peace. Look, no one's saying what you do isn't important. Oh, really? I raised an eyebrow. Because last I checked, every time my job comes up in conversation, you all act like I should be embarrassed. Like I should be ashamed of building something from the ground up just because it doesn't come with a fancy title or a corner office. Matt scoffed. Come on, it's not the same. What you do, I cut in, is bleed dad dry while pretending you're businessman. That shut him up. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the shore outside the villa. The private chef, the endless bottles of imported wine. It all suddenly felt absurd. This entire trip, this whole facade of a family vacation, built on the illusion that we were still the same family we had been years ago. But we weren't. I wasn't. And they hated that. I exhaled through my nose and leaned forward, placing my elbows on the table. You know what really gets me? The hypocrisy. Matt rolled his eyes. Oh, here we go! I ignored him. You all love to talk about status and legacy and prestige, but when it comes down to it, none of you actually do anything. You sit around living off a name that means less and less every year, waiting for Dad to fix your problems while looking down on me for actually working. Dad finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. That's enough. I turned to him, my expression unreadable. Is it? He exhaled, rubbing his temples. No one is doubting that you work hard, but there are certain expectations in this family, certain responsibilities. Responsibilities? I laughed bitterly. Like what? Pretending everything's fine while Matt's big business plans sink faster than a lead weight? Covering for Olivia's terrible investments? Smiling while you all pretend that without your help, I wouldn't have made it? Olivia flinched. Matt's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Isn't it? Silence. I sighed and leaned back. You know what? Let's stop pretending. Let's just say it out loud. I spread my hands. You all think that no matter how much money I make, no matter how successful I become, I'll never really belong at this table because of what I do. Because it's not respectable enough for you. No one disagreed. That was all the confirmation I needed. I took my time, letting that reality sink in. Then I picked up my glass, swirling the liquid inside before taking another sip. Well, here's a reality check for you. My voice was steady, cold. Prestige doesn't pay the bills. Status doesn't put food on the table. And respect, I let out a small chuckle. Respect means nothing if the people demanding it haven't earned it. Matt pushed back his chair abruptly, standing up. You think you're better than us, don't you? I met his eyes. No. I set my glass down. I just know my worth, and it turns out it's a lot more than whatever title you keep chasing. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else. Maybe another insult, maybe a weak attempt to regain control of the conversation. But nothing came out. Instead, he just shook his head and stormed out onto the balcony, slamming the door behind him. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You see? That's the difference between us. When things get uncomfortable, I stay. I deal with it. But you, I gestured toward the door, you run. Dad looked tired, older somehow. You don't have to do this. Do what? I gave a humorless smile. Speak the truth? His lips pressed into a thin line. You're still part of this family. I stared at him for a long moment, then I shook my head. No, I said simply. I'm your son, sure. But family? Family doesn't treat you like this. I pushed back my chair and stood up. Where are you going? Olivia asked, hesitant. To enjoy the rest of my vacation. I turned to face them one last time, my expression unreadable. You're welcome, by the way. And with that, I walked out, leaving them to sit in the mess they had made. This time, I wasn't the one cleaning it up. I spent the next 2 days actually enjoying my vacation without the constant backhanded comments and judgmental stares. The villa finally felt like paradise. Felt I swam in the infinity pool overlooking the ocean, took my morning coffee on the balcony in peace, even treated myself to a private fishing trip. For once, I wasn't just funding luxury, I was living it. But of course, the silence from my family didn't last. On the third evening, just as I was returning from a beachside dinner, I found my father waiting for me in the villa's lounge, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "We need to talk," I sighed, tossing my sunglasses onto the table. "Do we?" "Sit down." "I'm fine," he exhaled, rubbing his temple. "I'll just get to the point. The business is in trouble." I smirked. "No kidding. This isn't a joke." "Neither was my career," I shot back. "But that never stopped you from laughing at it." His eyes flickered with irritation, but he held his composure. "Look, I know we've had our differences," I scoffed. "Differences? You mean the part where you and the rest of the family treated me like a second-class citizen because I wasn't sitting in some cushy office pretending to be important?" "That's not fair," he said, but there was no real conviction behind it. I folded my arms. Tell me what's really going on, because if you're here alone, without Matt or Olivia, it means you're desperate, and I'd love to hear why." He sighed again, heavier this time, and set his glass down. "We're hemorrhaging money. The last few years have been rough, but now it's bad. We lost a few key investors, and Matt's last expansion attempt was a disaster. The bank won't extend another loan. If we don't do something fast, the company could collapse." I let the words sink in. So that's why they needed me now. Not because they suddenly saw my worth, not because they regretted treating me like an outsider, but because their golden child, their precious legacy, had driven the business straight into the ground. "And let me guess," I said, leaning against the counter, "you want me to help bail you out?" He didn't say anything, which was answer enough. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "You know, Dad, it's funny. A few nights ago, you were all sitting around that dinner table, making sure I knew that no matter how much money I made, I'd never be your equal. And now here you are, asking me for help." "It's not just about us," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "There are employees who rely on us, families who need their paychecks. This isn't just about pride." I tilted my head. "You sure about that? Because if this were only about protecting jobs, you'd have swallowed your ego and asked me for help before everything went to hell. Instead, you waited until you had no other choice." Silence. I sighed and crossed my arms. "Let me guess. You don't just need cash. You need someone with actual business sense to clean up Matt's mess, right?" Dad didn't answer. "He didn't need to," I scoffed. "Wow. So let me get this straight. I was never good enough to sit at your table as an equal, but now I'm suddenly good enough to fix all your problems. Is that it?" "You're still part of this family," he said, trying to sound reasonable. I laughed. "That's rich. When did I become family again? The moment you needed my bank account?" Dad's patience finally snapped. "For God's sake, son, stop being so petty. This is about something bigger than you." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "No, Dad, this is the first time this has ever been about me." I grabbed my sunglasses off the table and turned toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" "To get some sleep." I shot him a look over my shoulder. "And just so we're clear, I'm not giving you a dime." His expression darkened. "You're willing to let your own family fail?" I smiled. "No, I'm just finally willing to let you deal with your own consequences." And with that, I left him standing there alone, with his whiskey and his regrets. I knew my father wouldn't just let it go. Rich, powerful people never do. They don't hear the word no. They don't believe in consequences, at least not for themselves. So when I woke up the next morning to find my mother sitting on the villa's patio, sipping tea like she was waiting for me, I wasn't surprised. "Good morning, darling," she said smoothly, as if last night's conversation had never happened. I grabbed a coffee from the kitchen and sat down across from her, not bothering with pleasantries. "Did Dad send you?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Your father is upset. He doesn't understand why you're being so stubborn," I snorted. "Oh, I don't know, Mom. Maybe it's because you've all spent years making sure I knew I wasn't good enough for this family. Except now that you need my money, suddenly I'm valuable." "Don't be dramatic," she said, placing her cup down gently. "This is about family, about responsibility." "No," I said, "this is about control." I leaned back in my chair. "You don't actually care about my success, Mom. You just hate that I built something without you." Her expression hardened just for a second before she recovered. "That's not true," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Mom, what do you want?" "We want you to be part of something bigger," she said, folding her hands neatly on the table. "We want you back in the family business." I actually laughed. "You mean the failing business? The one Matt ran into the ground?" "It's not failing. The bank disagrees." I shook my head, still smiling. "This is unbelievable. For years, you all mocked my work, and now that I'm successful, you suddenly want me to drop everything and come running back. Why? Because now I'm useful? You've always been useful, dear, she said smoothly. Just not in the right way. That one stung. She saw it in my face and pushed forward. You have potential, but you've wasted it in... She gestured vaguely. Sanitation. I clenched my jaw. You mean in running a profitable business, the one that's more successful than yours? That's not the point. Then what is the point, Mom? I leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Dad don't actually care what I do, so long as it fits into your perfect little image of what success should look like. Image matters, she snapped, finally breaking her calm. This family has a legacy to protect. You don't understand how important that is. I shook my head, standing up. No, you don't understand. I don't need your approval. I never did. And I'm done playing by your rules. I turned to walk away, but her next words stopped me cold. Oh, what about Matt? I paused. She took the opportunity to keep talking. He's your brother. If the business fails, what happens to him? What happens to his kids, to Olivia, to all of us? There it was, the guilt trip. I turned back slowly. So that's it, huh? You can't convince me with insults, so now you're trying to guilt me into saving Matt? I'm asking you to do the right thing. I laughed bitterly. No, you're asking me to sacrifice myself so you don't have to deal with the mess you created. You're asking me to clean up after Matt, just like I've always had to clean up after this family. Silence. She looked at me with something almost like pity. You don't get it, do you? No matter how much money you make, no matter how successful you become, you'll never have what we have. The respect, the status. I smiled. Respect, I said slowly. You mean the kind of respect that disappears the moment the money runs out? She didn't answer. I nodded, as if I had finally figured something out. See, that's the difference between us, Mom. I built something real. Something that doesn't crumble the moment you take the fancy name away. I took one last sip of my coffee. So no, Mom, I'm not saving Matt. I'm not saving your business. I'm not saving any of you. I set the cup down on the table and turned toward the door. You want someone to clean up your mess? I glanced over my shoulder. Hire a professional. I hear sanitation pays well. And with that, I walked away, leaving my mother in stunned silence for the first time in her life. I should have known they wouldn't take no for an answer. The first sign came a few days later when I got a call from an old business associate, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, man, he said cautiously. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Your name's been coming up in some weird conversations. Some people are saying your business isn't as legit as it looks. I exhaled through my nose. Let me guess. My family. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It was classic damage control. If they couldn't get me to help them willingly, they'd try to pressure me into it. They'd call my work low class, spread rumors that I was just another guy with a truck and a pump, not a real entrepreneur. They'd use their social connections to turn people against me to make sure I needed them. But they had underestimated one thing. I had spent my entire career dealing with messes, and I was good at cleaning them up. So when I found out they were hosting a charity gala that weekend, one filled with business elites, socialites, and the type of people they desperately needed to impress, I decided it was time to return the favor. I walked into that event in a perfectly tailored suit, looking every bit as successful as the people they wanted to impress. Heads turned as I stepped into the ballroom. My presence alone enough to make my mother's face drain of color. What are you doing here? Matt hissed, appearing at my side. I smiled. Oh, didn't you hear? I'm networking. Before he could respond, I walked straight into the crowd, shaking hands, making conversation. And within minutes, it became clear they had not been expecting this. They had expected me to stay in my lane, to be the working-class embarrassment they could push around. They hadn't expected me to show up, to command attention, to talk business on their level. And then I made my final move. I waited until my father was mid-speech, thanking the donors and talking about legacy, before I spoke up. Speaking of legacy, I said, my voice carrying through the hall, I just signed a new contract. One that's going to change the waste management industry in the city. People turned. Some looked intrigued. Others looked confused. My family looked horrified. I smiled. In fact, my company just secured a deal with the city government. We'll be handling sanitation for several major districts, including industrial sites. It's one of the largest contracts in the industry this year. There was a beat of silence, then applause. People were impressed, genuinely impressed. I saw investors whispering to each other, nodding. A few even approached me right then and there. congratulating me, asking for details. And that's when I saw it, the realization in my father's eyes. He had spent years telling himself that my business didn't matter, that I was less than them, that I would always be in their shadow. But now I had just eclipsed them in front of their entire world. My mother tried to salvage the moment, laughing lightly. "Oh well, dear, you've always been hands-on." I turned to her, still smiling. "Yes, Mom. And that's why I build things while your business falls apart." Matt gritted his teeth. "You think one contract changes anything?" "No," I said easily, "but the fact that I don't need you does." And with that, I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, lifted it in a mock toast, and walked away. Because for the first time in my life, I had nothing left to prove. 1 year later, I sat in my office reviewing contracts when my assistant knocked. "Sir, your father is here to see you." I didn't react right away. I just let the words sit there. Let them settle. "Should I tell him you're unavailable?" I glanced out the window of my high-rise office. The city stretched below me, a view that once would have seemed impossible. But now it was mine. I took a slow breath. "No, send him in." A minute later, my father walked in. He looked smaller, thinner. The weight of a failing business and a crumbling legacy had finally caught up to him. "You're doing well, so," he said, glancing around. I nodded. "I am." He hesitated, then finally spoke. "The business is failing." I didn't react. "Matt's tried everything. Olivia too. But we can't hold it together anymore." I waited. "We need help." And there it was. The thing they had sworn would never happen. I let out a slow breath. "You spent years telling me I wasn't good enough. That I wasn't one of you. That my work wasn't respectable. Heap of lamb blood. And now you want me to save you?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "We're family." I leaned forward. "No, we're not." The words hit like a slap. "You don't mean that," he said quietly. I held his gaze. "Yes, I do." For the first time I saw it. Realization. He understood finally that I was gone, that he had pushed me away for too long, and there was no coming back. "I'm sorry," he said, at last, for everything. I studied him for a long moment. Then I stood up, adjusting my suit. "I know." And then I walked him to the door. Because no matter how much they regretted it, no matter how much they wanted to undo the past, I was done cleaning up their messes. They had made their choice, and I had made mine.